Okay, so the biggest story to come out of South African football this past week has to be Lucas Ribeiro Costa versus Mamelodi Sundowns. On the face of this whole thing, it's an open and shut case. Lucas Ribeiro Costa says that he comes back from the Club World Cup. There's offers coming in. Mamelodi Sundowns is upping the price in negotiations unreasonably, and because they're doing that, that should be ground to terminate his contract, get his international transfer certificate, and leave Mamelodi Sundowns. He says that if Sundowns is making the price so high, it's impossible for him to leave Mamelodi Sundowns because no teams are going to pay that price, and that is acting in bad faith and against the contract. There's a part of a contract that says just cause. You'll hear that quite a bit, right? So if he can prove that Mamelodi Sundowns has done that, boom, shut case, it should go his way, right? And I'll tell you why when I get into more of the meat of it. On the other hand, Mamelodi Sundowns is saying, guys, we are the contracting team. You are under contract with us. 4 years. If the contract says 4 years, you stay 4 years. 4 years, you can go and do whatever you want, but as long as you're a Sundowns player, you are under our control, and we get to decide whether A, we want to sell you at your market value, B, we want to sell you at over your market value, or C, we don't want to sell you at all, right? And they've said that they're arguing in fairness. Yeah, it's fairness, and they're being just in what they're doing, right? So, like I said, on the face of it, it looks like an easy thing. But here's the incredible part of the story and where it gets a little bit more juicy. It seems that Belgian lawyer Jean-Louis Dupont, he is the guy who's famous for winning the Bosman ruling. Now, the Bosman ruling is the biggest ruling in world football. It changed how transfers are done in football. Previous to the Bosman ruling, a club could let your contract end and still get a transfer fee from a club that wanted you. So, in essence, you would still be tied to a club even after your contract ended. He argued that this was against the movement of players, the movement of employees. And they argued on the labor laws of the EU, and they won the case. And that's why right now you can wait until your contract ends and go as a free agent. That didn't exist before. So this is the guy that won that case. But then secondly, he's representing Lassana Diarra. And Lassana Diarra's case is interesting. The first one was about development players going into first teams. So I'm a development player, my contract with the developing team ends, and I want to go to a new club. That new club has to compensate the club that developed, regardless of whether I was in or out of contract. That is a case that I believe he lost, right? The secondary case was his contract was terminated by a club. So there was misconduct on his part. The club terminated the contract, but wouldn't allow him to get his ITC and wouldn't allow him to move to another club, right? So I believe they still demanded some payment in order for them to release that ITC, which goes into what Jean-Louis Dupont is trying to do with Ribeiro. How I understand it is that he's crafting a class action lawsuit where he's going to take all of the players in situations similar to Ribeiro and put forward to FIFA and to the courts that all of these players have grounds to either terminate the contract or their contract has already been terminated. And they, if a contract is terminated, Lassana Diarra owed the club that terminated the contract an amount of money. And because of that amount of money, that club held on to him and tried to pass it on to the next club that was trying to sign him, in essence getting some sort of transfer fee. So what he's trying to do is to take all of these people and say, it doesn't matter what happened with the contract. It doesn't matter if the club owes if the player owes a club money because of a terminated contract. He should be allowed to move on. So life will go on while he's sorting out the problems. Why he's doing this in Ribeiro's case is the Ribeiro argument. Ribeiro's arguing that while we figure out all of this money stuff and whether you guys are fair or unjust, terminate a contract and then allow me to move to whatever club I want to move to, so that while we are sorting out these problems, my playing career can go on. So this is very interesting. The reason why it's a class action is that he's bringing all of these people together. If it's a 1v1 basis where Ribeiro versus Sundowns, it doesn't really make legal sense to go that route. So this is where Jean-Louis Dupont comes in, and he's made this a bigger question than just about Ribeiro versus Sundowns. It's now including the whole world. And he's trying to bank on European laws, because the EU is very strong in enacting things and holding organizations to account. Especially with things like labor laws, employment laws, and things like that. Lassana Diarra has allegedly won part of his case, where it's been shown in his legal battle. It's been judged that if FIFA has some issues with its transfer policies, and it's looking like Lassana Diarra will be able to sue FIFA and get some money back for the time that he spent without a club, all of the things that he had to do in order to get to this place, and FIFA is changing its regulations. What's interesting about the regulations changes is that if FIFA, let's say, decides that they're going to put a cap on value, first you got to figure out how to work out what a player's market value is. And secondly, if you put a cap on it, it changes how negotiations are done. So previously, when you look at the Bosman ruling, because clubs knew that if a contract ends, we don't have to necessarily let the player go, they didn't have to negotiate with the player. They could wait until the player got desperate and come with a deal and sign him on because he can't move on. Right? Players couldn't start negotiating pre-contracts, couldn't start speaking to other clubs, because they'd still be held to what the previous club had. Post the Bosman, now players are able to run out their contracts. And what's interesting about this is that if they do win, it means that a player, if they can prove that the club made me a promise, the club is acting in a manner that is not good for my career, they're holding me back for their own selfish gains, I can terminate a contract and not be held to a team maybe making me fight. So if you think about an example, Makate is fighting Vodacom. And it would be like Vodacom, in this time that they're fighting Makate is not able to go and work somewhere else because of this fight. Now the players will be able to have their fights with the club on their own, on their side, cancel a contract, deal with those things while still playing, which will change the outlook for football. Now, in general, when I look at it, I say what's nice about if this happens is that teams will be held accountable for any promises, any contractual things that they have. It will be a lot easier for players to be able to prove that and move on. So if Munna Pule Saleng was able to prove that Pirates acted in a bad way, let's say in his situation, his alleged situation, where there was an offer from somebody and Pirates said no or whatever, if you can prove that Pirates acted in a bad way, even with loaning him, then he would be entitled to cancelling a contract, maybe even getting some payment from that, and he'd be allowed to move on to the club that he wants to go to. If you look at the club side, it urges them to be a lot more stronger in their contractual wording in order to make sure that they can also prove that, guys, Tina, azange simbizele rumini is shaky sandla, sati we're going to do 1, 2, and 3. It's not in the contract. So that's interesting. But for me, I want to focus on the South African aspect of this, because I've been hearing a lot of people speaking about what they think of this. Firstly, I want to first say the details are not out. We don't know what the details of this whole thing are. We don't know what promises were or were not made. We don't know what Ribeiro's contract has. We don't know if Sundowns is acting right. We don't know if Ribeiro's not just being a spoiled brat. We know nothing about this. But I want us to have a general conversation, because there are some things that have been said that are worrying me. Number one, people have spoken about how you stick to your contract. You've signed a contract, and therefore the club gave you a contract. It doesn't matter what happens. You agree to these terms. To that I first say, in the general context of law, having a contract doesn't mean the contract is all the way right or all the way beneficial for both parties. There's a reason why we have things like the CCMA. There's a reason why we have things like the Consumer Protection Act, because they realized that some of these contracts have wording, have clauses, have things like that that may affect an employee, right? A lot of the contracts that we sign are very beneficial for the company that's signing you, but not necessarily beneficial to you. So you can't off bat say that a club did right. I'm not saying whether Mamelodi Sundowns did right or wrong. Secondly, we have to use the backdrop of the country. Let me tell you what the difference is in SA when it comes to going up against PSL teams. If you're a local player born in South Africa, when you have fights with the PSL or your team, you have to go through the PSL structures and then SAFA, and then maybe be able to go to FIFA. This is costly, number one. And then number two, you could argue that it's unfair to have to go through the people, right, that run the league. You can't fight an owner who then also runs the regulations, right? Again, I'm not saying whether this has happened or not. I'm not saying whether the PSL has exercised this or not. But what you find is that a lot of South African players, you hear the stories from Gaga, they've alleged that, yeah, my case just stopped. I went against the club and then my case didn't go anywhere, right? Number one. Number two, in the South African context, I've spoken about how relationships play a big role in South African football. So what happens is that I bring a player to a club, allegedly, and maybe in these negotiations, I'm a little bit lenient on the club because I understand that I need to eat in the future. And if I piss off this person, it might mean that later on, I'm not going to be able to get my players in the clubs. Very relationship based. It's something I've argued about our agents, that because they've got such a close relationship with the PSL and the owners and all of that, they tend to not want to press buttons. Usually negotiations, because you asked the question about these contracts. Why is it that i-contract yalo muntu doesn't have certain protections? Why is it that i-contract yalo muntu doesn't have certain risers? If I do this, I get this. If I do that, I get this. If an offer comes in, I get that. If maybe I need a release clause, maybe I need this, maybe I need that, right? Why don't those things exist? And if it doesn't exist in negotiation, it's not going to exist in the fight. And what we've seen a lot with the international players is, one, their representatives don't care. They don't care about a relationship with the PSL. They've got one client that's playing in South Africa. They go hard, they are blunt, they are straightforward, and they usually win their cases. And this is because of number two. What gives Ribeiro a little bit of power is that in this case, he's allowed, international players are allowed to go directly to FIFA. When they go directly to FIFA, they sometimes cut out the politics of the country. Again, this is alleged politics. But on the balance of everything we've seen, most of the international players that have grievances versus clubs, they win them because they go directly to FIFA, and FIFA hands down a ruling. They just look at the merits of the case and hand down a ruling. And most of the time, we've seen transfer bans. We've seen clubs having to pay back. You think about Abo Nekovic, you think about Abo Nascimento, you think about Abo Adriana Marana, you think about Abo Otieno, you think about all of the different cases that have happened in South Africa where the internationals have won because they get to bypass that system. Now, all of this is to say that just because you've got a contract doesn't mean it's right. Because remember, even in the contract itself, as a contracting party, I have to look out for my own. I have to look out for my own company. I have to look out for my own goals. I have to look out for my own growth and all of that stuff. I can't tie myself down to a tough contract. Obviously, I'm going to come in and I'm going to lowball you. I'm going to ask you for a 20,000 rand salary to see whether uyalwa. And then we'll negotiate up to the 150. But it's not illegal for the club to do that. Now, this is where I then look on the player side as well. The players are also, guys, get you people who are not involved in the PSL. Get you people who are able to look at the contracts objectively, who are able to look at the contracts as third parties, who are able to tell you what's going on in your contracts so that you know what's happening and you're not surprised later. Because even though consensus is a very important part of a contract, consensus is the understanding of a contract, is very hard to prove. And you find that a lot of the players are looking at their contracts and they don't know what is going on in the contract, what are the goals, what are the this, what are the this. You know, there's stories where they say, Bangfake officini, the contract was on the table, but you sign alana, sign alana, sign alana, sign alana, sign alana, nai maliako, nai petrol card, nai this, nai that, and the players, but dito aileont. We've heard about certain players, I'm not going to say their names, complaining that they used to watch their foreign counterparts get tons of money, right? Versus them who've got a good boy deal, a local boy deal, developmental deal, regardless of how they performed. And it all comes down to negotiations and knowing what you need to do. I think we're at a stage right now where contractually, you can't be looking at the thing and saying that I got caught out by something. Ask somebody, call somebody, get a second, third, fourth, fifth opinion if you need to on a contract before signing. So I wanted to deal with that one first. Secondly, I want to deal with the people saying that, you know, the players are being spoiled and all of that stuff. Look, guys, at the end of the day, the spirit of what happened at Bozeman was that the players were being let down. The structure was created in such a way that the players, even though contractually there may be a back and forth where a club can terminate a contract, a player can terminate a contract, it hadn't been done that way. So now even when you contracted, you still held under that structure. So some of these players want to further their careers, they want to get better. And as much as the club, yes, has the right to keep the guy, has the right to do all of that stuff, it doesn't mean that these guys don't want to go on. Now, to be fair to Mamelodi Sundowns in this case, a Club World Cup changes everything. This is something that we had spoken about, in that a Club World Cup now puts you into rarefied air. So not only is the club seen in a different light and maybe the club is attracting different people, now the players are too, and offers were inevitably going to come. Unfortunately for Sundowns, I think also the time between the Club World Cup and the league starting didn't allow them to do transfer business the way that they wanted to, and it was a little bit of a rush. So you can maybe understand why they want to keep Ribeiro Costa. They want to hold them close. They want to make sure that they don't go far, because they didn't have a chance to replace and renew and do all of that stuff. So I wanted to have this conversation in order for us to broaden what we think about this situation, because it's very easy to pick a side. I've said in the beginning, I don't pick any sides. Ribeiro Costa, if these promises were made, they should have been made on paper. If you're proving that it's unfair, prove that it's unfair. Mamelodi Sundowns, in this case, if the offers are coming and you guys are saying no and you had made a promise, then you guys are also not very good actors here. But like I said, we don't know enough of what's going to happen. But this case has the ability to be a huge, huge, huge thing in football as a whole, because it's going to allow players to have a power that they have not had before. And it's going to change football. Players in the Bozeman ruling were now knowing that the club has to come negotiate with me 2 years out from my deal. We hear it everywhere, where the player's going into the final year of his deal. It's very hard to sell them. It's very hard to sign them, because they have the ability to just wait it out. And if the club at the other end is willing to wait, shame. You lose out on money. Supersport used to complain about this. Gavin used to complain about how his players used to wait and wait and wait, and how you hear Mutusa signile pre-contract. End of the season, they're gone. You can't say anything. That was a Bozeman ruling. This could also change a lot, because, hey man, if my club is not playing ball, or if I feel my club is not playing ball, or if I'm being cynical and my club is doing everything they want to do, but I can prove, I can somehow jimmy the law to prove that they're in the wrong, I can terminate a contract and get a higher signing fee like this, which is, I think, a scary proposition for the clubs of the world. How FIFA handles this is going to be very interesting with the regulations. So I want to see how this is going to play out. I want to see what's going to happen. If you ask my personal opinion about this, I think there's a huge burden of proof that's been laid at Ribeiro's feet. Because what clubs do is that they've buttoned up their side. You don't come to training for X amount of days. We have the opportunity to terminate your contract. You act a certain way, we say you're bringing the club in to distribute, we terminate your contract. It feels unilateral. It feels like it's one-sided. It feels like the one side can do it while players struggle the other way around. This may change a lot, and I foresee a lot of players either seeking damages or a lot of players changing. I spoke about Isak right now. If this goes through and they win it, if these cases go through and they win it, now you can look at Newcastle and say, I'm going to Liverpool for a free. Imagine if Liverpool is invested in this thing. Maybe they help with the lawyers. Maybe they help with all of these things. So FIFA has a very, very big thing on their hands. But I just wanted to speak about this and give a little bit of depth to the conversation. Of course, I'm not here to be right. I'm not here to always be right and say everything correctly. The point of this is to open up the conversation. Now that we've got a little bit of context on each angle, how do you guys feel? Tell me in the comments where you guys land on all of this right now. Tell me in the comments what you would do if you were Ribeiro Costa, what you would do if you were Mamelodi Sundowns in this case. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and take these conversations into the world. Take them into your WhatsApp groups, take them into your friend groups, take them all over the place so that we can have discussions that can grow our football, that can help even future players maybe understand what they're walking into, what they're signing, understand what's going to be happening. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'll see you on the next one.